Okay, take two on this, guys. For some reason, after I recorded it, it was gone. I don't know. I don't understand how. We got a request for the Slover bow ties versus Charlie bow ties, or the old Chevelle bow ties. Unfortunately, both of the Slover bow ties did have some Charlie work done to them. You can see on the exhaust, around the bowl, I have some burr action. Further down in the port, you see that mirror finish? That is Slover porting. As far as the intake bowl, that all of that grinding is a minimum of 8 years old. Because I remember working on these when I first got down to Florida. The chamber is all Slovers except for the plunge cut, where I goofed up the valve job. Basically, they kept the Thule shape stock. Right? They polished it. It's gone over with a cartridge roll. It looks pretty good. As far as liquid flow, it does a pretty decent job. Very, very similar to mine. Even though I have my chamber kicked out a little bit more, it looks pretty good. Okay, this was 5th cut. It still has a Dykem on it. These were poured today, so I had to hit them with a little WD-40, which tends to dissolve the Dykem. You can see we got a little more around the exhaust valve. And a little bit different shape in the bowl and on the chamber. But they both look pretty good. Okay, you can see down the Slover bow tie where the liquid is. One thing I did notice about the Slover port is it's not quite as wide at the short side radius on the roof. On the roof and the short side radius, it's a little narrower. It also poured a little bit smaller. These poured exactly 200 cc's. Mine were 204. Okay, you see a little bit of clay by the bolt hole because it was broken through. I have the same thing on mine. The pinch is almost identical on both heads. Okay, these are the Chevelle bow ties. They have a different shaped bowl. They are narrower in the mid-range, and then the roof gets wider. The Slover ones are more like a triangle. They get narrower and narrower as they go down. Okay, because the roof isn't nearly as wide. So that's an important point. That's where those 4 cc's come out of. That and the width and the short side radius. As a comparison shot, these are my Chevelle bow ties. And they're shiny because I had to hit this with a little WD-40. Okay, the exhausts are radically different. And we're going to discuss the difference in the design quite a bit. Now, these are my Chevelle bow ties. The shape at the flange is almost exactly stock. The way I usually like to do exhausts. I don't like them bigger than stock. I try to keep them relatively small. But I take out way more width-wise on the port around the God Boss, where it's restricted by the valve stem. I give it more area than the Slover bow ties. Let's take a look at the Slovers. Okay, the Slover bow ties have a completely different shape. They're an upside down D, basically. So the roof was raised considerably and made a lot wider. They also are much bigger. They're 65 cc's, and my Chevelle bow ties are 61.5. So I remember when I saw these at the swap meet, I saw that exhaust shape, and I think there was a Australian manufacturer back then that was doing like an upside down D exhaust that were pro something. But that company had a really good reputation. So I saw these and I'm like, well, maybe this guy knows something I don't. And I picked them up. But if you take a look, they're definitely not as wide where the valve stem comes through as mine are. But they're much bigger in the opening. Let's do a measurement on how much taller these are. Okay, this is going to be tough to do, but let's see what we can do. That's how much taller it is. So the roof has been raised, and if you take a look at the floor, let's compare that floor to my old Chevelle heads. Okay, that shape is dead stock. It's flat until it starts to curve into the vertical walls. I did not change that a bit. That's just the way GM cast it. So what they wound up doing was they actually lowered the center of that floor, which I don't agree upon, because as it is, that's a speed, the low speed area, and you don't want to make a low speed area bigger, right? In fact, you want to make it smaller, because you can cause a lot of reversion right there. In fact, if you study fluid dynamics, if you have real high speed air on the top, which this is designed to do, that's why it's got all that area on the top, the real slow moving air could actually go back into the port. It doesn't sound right, but it's true. So I think these were done as like oval track. I think they were designed for higher RPM, sustained, and one of them actually had a crack and it was welded, and it was because the guide failed, so it couldn't get rid of the heat. It was probably sustained racing, and it couldn't get rid of the heat, and then it cracked, and it was welded, and the guy, whoever welded it, did a really nice job. I don't have any problem with the way it was welded at all. Okay, inside the bowl you can see the rougher burr texture is where I did some work on that bowl, and it's still quite a bit narrower than the Chevelle bowl. It also has a little bit different throat. Let's take a look at the throats. Okay, the Chevelle Bowties are 1.32 inches across the narrowest spot in the bowl. The Slovers are a little bigger, but I did grinding on these, so they are 1.34. Ruined by Charlie, you could say. Ruined. Okay, you can see these actually have got, I put bronze in these. I did have problems with removing two of those spiral bronze guides, and I did break I broke two of these off, and you can tell, they're threaded, so they're super thin. So when I was machining them out to put the thin wall bronze in there, they both snapped off. The rest of them are good to go, so there's no problem. I don't really, I'll have to bring that to the machine shop, and you can put some cast iron guides in. Okay, the Slover short side radius is relatively tall. It looks pretty good. It is cartridge rolled. Sorry, that's a light burr. I do believe it was cartridge rolled when I flowed it, though. These have had, I think I did I do all of these? No, I only did that one port on these. Okay. The other head has had more work done to it. Sorry, guys. All right, tough to see, but it does have a little bit different shape. This is laid back. It looks like a touch more. But due to the other head having welding on it, I'm going to leave those a little bit higher, I think. when I do work those exhaust ports, I'm going to work more on the width of the port than anything else, because they're already big. So I'm going to try to make the efficiency the best I can for what we got. Okay, on the left is the Chevelle Bowtie. That's the 5th cut on that. So 5th cut, I only did the intake because I was done with the exhaust on the 4th cut. I was happy with it. And the 5th cut, all I did is I tried to even out the speeds on the short side radius, because I wasn't happy with how fast the short side radius was in that one spot. It's still quite fast in one spot. Now that's one thing that I noticed, and sorry if I repeat myself, guys. That's what happens when you do 2 videos the same. The Slover port definitely isn't as wide across the top of the bowl, and the short side radius width is definitely less. I think I already mentioned that. But let's see how we did. Now these pluses and minuses here are in reference to these flows. Okay, so Chevelle, Slover, ported, ruined by Charlie. Okay, plus, plus, minus, 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 minus. Okay, now, not busting on Slover at all. I mean, if these were oval track heads, remember, they only flow about 230 stock, so a 40 CFM gain is huge. Huge. So they went up from about 185 cc to 200 and got 40 CFM extra flow. Not bad. Not bad at all. Let's take a look at the swirl here. Plus, minus, 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 plus, 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 minus, minus, minus. The swirl is still pretty good. Right around the area where you'd be racing, fine. Okay? Not really a problem. Let's take a look at the air speeds on the intake. Okay, push rod pinch, that was measured at 0.567. This push rod pinch was measured at 0.567, minus, 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 because it flows a little bit less. It flows 278. This is 283.9. The pinch, I said, was almost identical in size. Roof, 183, 182. A little bit slower on the cylinder wall side. Okay. Short side radius numbers. Minus, minus, minus. Now think about that. It's a narrower short side radius. They're almost identical in height. So the only thing really different, the short side radius is on the intakes, is the width. The width of the short side radius. This is definitely a narrower short side radius. You would think the speeds would be up more, but it doesn't always work that way, right? Because you make it wider, it makes more air want to go around it, take the shortest path, increases the speeds. So you have to test, right? Okay, let's take a look. We should take a look at a couple flows. Let's see. At 200, we're 149.6, 145, close. At 300, we're 209.3, 198.4, 500, 287, 269, and we top out 293, 282. 282 is not a bad number. That's all these flowed before with the 90s porting. That's all they flowed, was around 280, 282. And like I said, these were probably oval track, so you know it could have quite a bit of lift on them. Okay, this page is Chevelle Bowtie 4th cut, because that's when I finished up my development on the exhaust flow. So we're going to compare these flows to these flows. So these pluses and minuses here are in reference to these. Okay, how do we do? Minus, 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 minus. Plus, minus with a P, pulsating. minus with a P, pulsating. Pulsating's not good. Okay, it's literally a sound on the bench where you can hear it's starting to separate. Minus, minus, minus. Couldn't use the small pipe on here because the port's too big, so I had to use the big pipe. So if you compare the big pipe numbers to the big pipe numbers here, 225.1, 230.7, 237.4, 241. That's a big difference. Okay, and the really important part to that is not that it flows that much more, but it does flow a little more, and it's a smaller port, guys. Now, if you're calculating, if you're running something really high RPM, that's when you may want the exhaust more like this. But this was street design, so I think this will work better for a street application. Let's compare some numbers. Let's go 20,000s, 120, 20,000s, 110 with a pulsation. Okay. 300, 163.2, 158.2, 500. Now let's go 600. 201.4, 190. Okay. Let's take a look at our exhaust speeds and see if we can figure out where that extra efficiency comes from. So these were the air speeds on my Chevelle Bowtie heads, and these pluses and minuses are in reference to that. Okay, minus, plus, minus, 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 minus. Okay, it's a bigger port that flows less, so what should the air speeds do? Go down. The only spot it went up was right here, and it went from 296 to 306. Okay, the important points to look at: completely dead at the center. Okay, 140 to 81. Take a step up, 218, 326. Huge difference. This corner, 210, 132. 278, 247. These air speeds are much better. Okay, which is why it works better. It's more efficient. Now, that's where... Hold on a second. Okay, to look at our exhaust again, right? Now, what they did is they lowered that floor. So what they did is they took a already low speed area and gave it more area. So what's going to happen to that? And drop the speed even more. Okay. In fact, what should it be? What should that floor look like? It should look something like that. It should have literally a vein or a fin right in the middle of the floor to get rid of that low speed area. And I talked to the older guy from High Velocity Heads at PRI one year, and I asked him, why'd you put the fin in that port? What does the fin do? I said. He goes, it does absolutely nothing. And I giggled. And he goes, I actually did it because I wanted to see how many people would copy my design next year, and a lot of people did. But in reality, he just wasn't telling me that he was reducing that low-speed area right there, which is actually good engineering. I like it. And I don't really expect to get a straight answer either. It's fine. So, not knocking on Slover. Overall, they make good power. You have to remember, Charlie did some work on them, so they may have made a lot better flow before Charlie touched them. It's possible. I do remember I took some metal out of the throat on both of them, which I wouldn't do today. I would have kept it tighter. But we'll see. I'm going to do some work to these, and we're going to see if we can get that efficiency up. I think they're worth saving, even though one of them was welded. Let me show you the welded spot. Okay, you can see I did some work on that. I wasn't thrilled with that little carbon crunch pocket. Right, that's what it should look like. This was welded, but it had a little crack from here into the exhaust. You can see they did a nice job on the exhaust. You can hardly even see it was welded. But what I think happened was the guide failed. That's the only one with an iron guide in it. So what I think happened is it was a high speed, endurance racing, and the guide went away and it overheated it and cracked it there. So like I said, I don't have a problem running a welded head as long as it's done well. And I'm going to make sure it stays thick, so probably I'll never have a problem again. Alright guys, I think that's enough for one night. Almost 21 minutes. The first time I did it was only 15 minutes, so I must have added something. And I probably forgot a couple things on also. In any case, thanks for hanging out, guys. What should we ask in the comments? Are these worth fixing up? They were. That's one thing I forgot. Take a look at the chamber. Take a look at this part of the chamber right here. This is only up a few thousandths. Okay, these are the Chevelle ones. Look how thick this is. They may have been, I think the Slovers were angle milled, to be honest. I think my bow ties were flat milled, because you start measuring thicknesses like, the bottom of the port or the bottom to the water jacket there, and the Slovers are higher on the water jacket, but yet are much thinner on the other side of the head. So yeah, I'd have to put them on a block and see. Oh, that's another point. If they were angle milled, they would have had to change this face angle here. That would make that port a little bit smaller, wouldn't it? It's an interesting point. I mean, if you're going to compare CCs, that makes a difference. Is it going to make a huge difference? No, probably half a cc. But it still makes a difference. Remember, those were only 200. Mine were 204. The Slover exhausts were 65. The Chevelle exhausts were 61.5. Alright, guys. Thanks for hanging out. Have a good night.